The palace nursery echoed with cries that no walls could contain. For 7 nights the youngest heir had wailed, his small chest heaving until even the marble floor seemed to vibrate with the sound. Nurses rocked him, healers whispered charms, musicians played notes carved from crystal, nothing eased him. The queen stood watch, her face pale with exhaustion. She had not slept in over 60 hours. Her physician had warned her that sustained wakefulness would damage her cardiac rhythm. Her own knees had started to tremble, but she refused to leave the child's side. Courtiers bowed low, yet none dared meet her eyes. The sacred lullaby of the royal bloodline had been sung flawlessly, perfectly, but the child only screamed louder, as if rejecting the weight of its formality. Then, from the back of the chamber, a voice spoke. Soft. Human. May I try? Gasps rippled through the room. Guards' hands fell to their weapons. A human, touching a song of the crown? Madness. But the queen, too weary for ceremony, gave the smallest nod. And the human stepped forward, knelt by the cradle, and began to sing. It was the same melody, yet not the same. Rougher, gentler, a lullaby bent by warmth instead of perfection. The wails faltered, tiny fists loosened. The heir's eyes fluttered shut. Silence fell over the palace. And then the scrape of steel guards drawing their blades. Stop. The queen's voice was soft, but absolute. The guards froze. She stared at the human, not in anger, but in disbelief. Her gaze then dropped to the sleeping child. The heir's breathing was shallow, but even. A light tremble remained in one hand, residual from the week-long distress. His small body was in acute exhaustion, but the frantic neural signals that had lit the med scans like a storm now began to still. The queen stepped forward. "Where did you learn that song?" she asked. The human, who had not moved from his kneeling position, looked up, unsure if he'd committed treason or a miracle. "My grandmother used to sing it," he said quietly. "Back on Earth, we didn't know it meant anything." The silence grew dense. His name was Nathan Cole. Born in Iowa, descended from generations of grain farmers. He had arrived at the court 6 months earlier as part of an interspecies exchange, the first wave of humans welcomed into the royal household. He was not a scholar, not a diplomat. Just a quiet man with good hands and a calm presence, assigned to care for the palace's lesser garden quadrants and occasionally assist in the nursery. Until now, few had noticed him. Now, they could not look away. The queen stared at him for a long time, her jaw set. Then she looked to her steward. "Remove the guards, clear the room." "But your majesty?" "Do it, now." Within minutes, the nursery was empty save for the queen, Nathan, and the sleeping heir. She moved to the cradle and looked down. The child's fever had dropped. His pulse was still fast, borderline tachycardic but no longer spiking dangerously. His eyelids twitched. A REM pattern had begun, a sign his brain was returning to a stable circadian rhythm. The healer's logs from the past nights showed that the child's cortisol levels had reached critical thresholds. Sleep deprivation in infants of their species could trigger immune collapse. Another 24 hours without sleep would have led to organ instability. She turned to Nathan. "Sing it again." He hesitated. "Is that allowed?" "It is now." This time, the queen sat beside the cradle. She didn't speak, she didn't interrupt. Nathan's voice was not polished. He didn't shape the vowels like the court singers. But there was a steadiness in it, a comfort that filled the room like warm light. His voice dropped slightly on the 4th line, an instinctive change, one he'd made since he was little, a way his own mother had sung it. The queen's head tilted. "You altered it," she said. "No, ma'am," he replied. "That's how I learned it. But that phrasing, that's older than any recording we have." He didn't answer, just sang. Afterward, she ordered a full genetic and archival sweep. Privately. No council members were told. Only her personal archivist, who worked in a sealed chamber below the 4th tower, had access to the raw records. What they found confirmed the impossible. The lullaby was ancient, predating even the consolidation of the royal houses. It had been encoded not in music sheets, but in genetic memory. A vocal tradition, carried only by oral transmission through the sovereign line. It had last been recorded in full 3 generations ago. Since then, it had been fragmented, ritualized, trimmed down to formal verses used only in coronation and mourning rites. The heir had rejected all of that. But not the human's voice. Nathan was moved to quarters 2 floors above the nursery. Not a cell, a guest chamber. Still, he was assigned 2 palace guards, and denied access to the outer gardens. Every day at sundown, he was summoned. Every night, he sang. The heir would begin to whimper by the early evening, his sleep schedule not yet recovered. The palace physicians measured every breath. But when Nathan arrived and took his seat by the cradle, calm returned. Sleep followed. A week passed. Then 2. Rumors grew like mold. Some claimed Nathan was a spy planted by a lost bloodline. Others said he was a clone of the Queen's great-uncle, preserved and reanimated in human form. Some whispered the child was not of true royal stock, and only a human could connect with it because it was born of some forbidden union. Nathan ignored it all. He focused on the child, on the soft rise and fall of breath, on making sure the cradle's frame was stable and the sheets were clean and warm. When the heir began waking with soft cries instead of screams, Nathan adjusted the tempo of the song. He sang slower, softer. It worked. The court watched, in fear, in awe. 3 weeks after the first night, the Queen called a council. Only 8 advisors were permitted entry. Nathan was brought to the throne room under armed escort. She stood, robes sweeping the floor, her crown absent. "Tell them," she said. He cleared his throat. "I grew up hearing the song," Nathan said. "My grandmother called it Cradle Bell. I didn't know where it came from. She said her own father sang it to her. We never questioned it." The historian frowned. "Your Earth records do not list any melodies matching this structure." Nathan shrugged. Maybe it wasn't in the books, just the voices. The Queen turned to her inner circle. "The lullaby was hidden," she said, "because it carries a coded message." They stiffened. "It is a song of legacy, not command, not power. It speaks of unity, of warmth. It was buried because our ancestors feared softness would undo strength." The room was still. Then the High Advisor asked, "And you believe it should be sung again?" The Queen turned to Nathan, to her child, now healthy, sleeping, dreaming without tears. "I believe it already has." By the end of the 4th week, the heir began reaching for Nathan. It started subtly, a small grasp toward his shirt hem, a gurgle when his voice entered the room. By the 5th week, the infant cried not from pain or fear, but from impatience if Nathan took too long to begin the song. He no longer needed to hold the child. Just sitting nearby was enough. His voice did the rest. The palace physicians called it conditioned neural association. In less technical terms, the child's brain had linked the lullaby in Nathan's voice alone with rest, warmth, and safety. It wasn't that the song itself had magical properties. It was how it was sung. Not with training, not with perfection, but with feeling. Still, the court was uneasy. The council convened again in private chambers. Nathan was not invited this time. Instead, he sat in the garden under guard, a steaming cup of something herbal in his hands. He was learning to tell which glances from palace staff meant curiosity, which meant fear, and which hid something worse. He didn't want power, didn't ask for anything. But to the court, the heir had bonded with a human, and that made everything unstable. Inside the chambers, Lord Vezel slammed his hand on the stone table. "This cannot continue. The child's mind is forming an alien cadence, a human voice shaping royal instinct. What do you think that does to loyalty? To legacy?" The Queen stood at the far end, one hand resting on the glass pane overlooking the gardens. "Then tell me who among you can make the child sleep." Silence. "You've all tried. Healers, priests, musicians trained from birth in tonal alignment. You stood by while my son starved for rest." Still no response. "You don't understand," she continued. "It's not just the melody, it's the way he sings it. There's warmth in his voice that court songs lost generations ago." Another voice, this time from the archivist, broke the silence. "There is a precedent. From the earliest dynasty, before the fracture." The room shifted. "Go on," the Queen said. The archivist, a pale creature with veins that pulsed just beneath her skin, unfolded a cloth-bound tablet. On it, she displayed a rotating glyph, not music in the human sense, but a pulse-based harmonic map. This was recorded long before the Empire's unification. The voice captured in this pattern isn't alien, or rather, not just alien. She looked at the Queen. It's partially human. The revelation shattered the next council gathering. Dozens of nobles spilled into debates, each more panicked than the last. If humans shared our bloodlines, it would mean our founding myths are lies. Or half-truths, another snapped. Which are worse? Or, unity was always the point, the Queen murmured. The nobles fell silent again. Then came the loudest voice yet. If unity was the goal, why was the song buried? No one had an answer. That night, Nathan was escorted to a different chamber. Not his usual quarters near the nursery. This room was deeper in the palace, round and domed, with acoustics that made his footsteps echo even on the velvet floor. A single figure waited. The Queen. This chamber was built for the voice of the crown, she said, a role we lost centuries ago, someone who sang to guide the soul of the dynasty. Nathan didn't speak. She gestured toward the dais. Sing for me. He hesitated. The lullaby? No, sing what you know. He sang something older than the lullaby. A song about home, about rain hitting tin roofs, about wood smoke and summer dust. His voice cracked on the third verse. It wasn't perfect. He didn't try to make it so. When he finished, the Queen sat down. Her expression was unreadable. Then she said, You're not just a novelty, Nathan. You're a reminder. Of what? That our dynasty was built on something warmer than fear. She stood. You don't just soothe my son. You've woken something the court buried on purpose. The next day, Nathan found a small satchel outside his room. Inside it, an artifact. A tiny cube of preserved bark. Human in origin. Carbon dated to over 500 years prior. Inside the cube, a chip vocal encoding. A near-identical match to the lullaby he'd sung. Attached was a handwritten note. You weren't the first. He took the artifact to the Queen. She stared at it, then at him. There was contact, she said. He nodded. A long time ago, maybe before either side was ready. But someone remembered. He didn't ask how it had come into her possession. She didn't offer. They both understood what it meant. The lullaby wasn't just royal, it was shared. A tether. That night, the heir did not cry. He reached for Nathan's voice before he even opened his eyes. No wailing, no resistance. Just a small breath, a hand twitching upward, as if he knew that voice belonged to him. Nathan sang until the child slept, then stayed. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. By the second month, Nathan no longer needed a guard escort to reach the nursery. He came and went with silent nods from sentinels. Courtiers still whispered, still parted as he passed, but now with caution instead of contempt. Some called him the sleeper's voice, others, more spitefully, the Queen's human, but no one dared interfere. Because the heir was thriving. The child's vitals had stabilized. His oxygen saturation, once a concern due to shallow, distressed breathing, now remained steady, even in deep sleep. His feeding reflexes normalized. His immune system rebounded, muscle tone returned to baseline, and his neurologic patterns were consistent with early developmental expectations. For the first time in weeks, the court's pediatric specialist filed a routine report with no warnings flagged in red. And still, the Queen insisted Nathan continue the lullaby every evening, not just for the child, for herself. Sometimes, Nathan arrived early and found her already there, not regal in posture, but slouched on a velvet bench beside the cradle. No crown, no attendants. Just a mother watching over her child, eyelids heavy, shoulders drawn tight with too many sleepless nights of her own. You can go, he'd say softly. She never did. One night, she asked, Did your people really think they were alone? Nathan shook his head. Not the smart ones, but the loudest ones, sure. And this song, she said, you never thought to question it? It was just family, he said. Something passed down. We didn't know it came from anyone but ourselves. But it didn't. No, he agreed, and neither did we. Later that same week, two rival houses submitted formal inquiries to the Queen's office. In the coldest legal phrasing possible, they asked, "What precedent allows a human voice to fulfill a right of the crown?" It was not a challenge. Not yet. But it was a warning. In response, the Queen held an open court session. It hadn't been done in decades, not since before Nathan arrived, and the entire palace was stirred into unease. Nathan was summoned, but not informed of the agenda. He stood at the center of the hall, under a dome carved with ancient phrases, his back straight and hands folded. The throne sat high above, the Queen flanked by advisors. And beside her for the first time was the cradle. The heir, awake but calm, nestled in a small nest of layered cloth. His eyes searched the chamber, then landed on Nathan. He did not cry. The Queen stood. In the ancient tradition, she began, songs of the bloodline were sung by those bound by lineage, by blood, by birth, or by coronation. But blood is not the only thing that binds. The nobles remained silent. "My son," she continued, "knows none of your names. He knows no houses, no factions, no symbols. But he knows safety, and he found it in a voice not our own." Nathan swallowed. She gestured to him. "That voice," she said, "belongs not to the court, not to the crown, but to the child. And that is enough." Some called it weakness. Others called it treason, though not allowed. But none of them could make the heir sleep. Nathan did. That fact outweighed everything else. After the hearing, Nathan was offered a title. Keeper of Echoes, they called it. A newly created position, ceremonial on the surface, but in practice it gave him rank, authority, protection. He declined. "I'm just singing to a baby," he said. The Queen stared at him a long time. "And that," she replied, "is why it matters." But peace did not last. The high noble, from House Tren Lord Firel, began seeding discontent among the outer colonies. He claimed the lullaby was a security breach. That Nathan's presence, however well-intentioned, was a dangerous dependency for the royal heir. He made speeches, issued warnings, threatened to withhold resources if the alien influence continued. The Queen sent emissaries, letters, then silence. Until the message came back: remove the human or prepare for secession. The Queen summoned Nathan to her study. "I won't ask you to go," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "But if I stay, you'll face a civil fracture." She nodded once. "If I send you away, he won't sleep. Maybe for a few nights, but children adapt. Not when they know what's been taken from them." That night, Nathan didn't sing. He stood at the cradle in silence, watching the heir's eyes flicker, his hands twitch. The child cooed softly, expectant, waiting for the rhythm. Nathan opened his mouth, then stopped. He reached down instead, placed his palm gently on the child's belly, and whispered, "You're going to be fine, even without the song." The child stared at him. No tears, but not peace either. The Queen watched from the doorway. She didn't stop him. When he turned to go, she finally spoke. "Was it ever just a lullaby to you?" Nathan hesitated. "It was never just a song," he said. Nathan left the palace at dawn. No procession, no farewell ceremony. Just a quiet escort through the amber-lit corridors, his bag slung over one shoulder. The Queen stood at the high balcony as he crossed the courtyard. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her face said everything. Grief laced with the discipline of a ruler, and something deeper, the sadness of a mother handing her child back to a world that doesn't sing. He didn't look back. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew if he did, he might never leave. He returned to a quieter region of the empire, a mixed-species outpost known more for agriculture than politics. A small job in a planetary conservatory, tending to genetically hybridized flora, suited him well. Days passed in soil, and Sunday nights were colder, but clean. He never sang, not at first, not to himself, not to the plants, not even in his sleep. Until one night, 2 months later, the dreams returned. He saw the child's face, not crying, just listening. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, the way infants listen, not with comprehension, but with the whole body. Nathan woke with his chest tight and the first line of the lullaby humming behind his teeth. Back in the palace, the heir didn't cry, not like before. But he also didn't sleep. He rested in fragments, 2 hours, then 1, waking with disorientation, unsoothed. The royal medics adjusted his environment. Gravity slightly altered, temperature modulated, humidity matched to recorded optimal thresholds. They brought in specialists from 3 systems. Still, his rhythms were shallow, his cognitive development slowed. The queen refused to demand Nathan's return. She had promised herself that much. She had made a choice to stand against Lord Firal's threats, to preserve unity, and she would not retreat from it. But the absence weighed on her. She spent more hours in the nursery now than the throne room. She even tried to hum the song herself, twice. The notes sat in her throat like foreign stones. Then, one dusk, a package arrived. Unmarked. Delivered not through royal channels, but passed from hand to hand across merchant convoys until it reached the palace courier. Inside, a small audio device. Nothing else. No signature. The queen placed it beside the cradle and activated it. Nathan's voice filled the room rougher now, as if recorded at the end of a long day, but warm, familiar, every phrase of the lullaby intact. The heir's eyes blinked once. Then again. His hand flexed. And then he slept. 6 hours. Then 8. The palace recorded the longest uninterrupted sleep cycle since his birth. The queen played the recording again the next night. And the next. Word reached the court slowly. Not from the queen, she said nothing officially. But the staff knew. The guards noticed. And when foreign dignitaries arrived, they were told, plainly, that the child slept now, thanks to a voice not born of the bloodline, but of something else. The implications rippled across the empire like heat under still water. A full cycle passed. Nathan didn't return. He didn't need to. The queen never tried to summon him. Instead, she did something that shocked even her own council. She introduced a new role into court governance. The voice of memory. Not a rank of power, not a political seat, just a recognition that legacy could live in places other than blood, in sound, in warmth, in the quiet moments between war and ceremony. The role required no lineage. Only that its bearer understood how to carry memory in something other than ritual. The court voted to formalize it. The first to hold the title in centuries? A human. In absentia. Nathan never wore robes, never gave speeches. But sometimes, when the planetary feeds broadcast the Queen's seasonal address, he would hear the melody played faintly before her entrance. The music had been reorchestrated, stately, complex, almost theatrical. But under it, if he listened closely, the old tune still lived. And in the evenings, on the edge of his outpost farm, surrounded by plants that leaned toward his breath, as if they, too, remembered the song, Nathan would hum a single line. Never the full lullaby. Just enough. And somewhere, light years away, a child dreamed without fear.